There is a man in this story who built one of the most powerful companies in West Africa. He started with nothing. He came from a small town where nobody had heard of the stock market and where the biggest dream most people had was a government job and a pension. He had none of that. He had a brain that worked differently from everyone around him and a stubbornness that his mother called a problem, and that turned out to be the most valuable thing he owned. He built Sterling Global from one small trading desk in a Lagos office that barely had air conditioning into a financial powerhouse, with offices in 7 countries and thousands of employees. And then he got sick. Not the kind of sick that ends everything, the kind that changes it. He was losing his sight, slowly, quietly, the way some things leave before you fully understand they are going. And the man who had spent his entire career seeing things that other people missed was now facing the specific irony of a world that was getting darker at its edges. He had one thing left to do before he stepped back. He needed to choose who would run the company after him. He had 3 candidates. Marcus, smart, aggressive, hungry. The kind of man who made the numbers work because he did not care much about what happened to the people behind the numbers. Elena, brilliant and organized. The kind of woman who could optimize anything, including situations and people, for the best possible outcome for herself. And Sarah, young, late to almost everything, from the wrong background with the wrong school name on her CV, and the right quality in her that nobody in the boardroom had taken the time to see yet. He told all 3 of them there was a final interview, a location across town, 2 in the afternoon, be there. And then he put on a pair of dark glasses, picked up a white cane, and stepped out onto the street between the office and the location. He was the final interview. Not the destination, the journey. What each of his 3 candidates did when they saw an old blind man in distress on their way to the most important meeting of their careers, that was the question. That was the whole test. What Marcus did will make your jaw tighten. What Elena did is more subtle and more telling. What Sarah did cost her 15 minutes she could not afford. And what those 15 minutes got her is the part nobody in that boardroom was prepared for. This story starts in a small town in the 1970s with a boy who had no money and an idea. And it ends in a boardroom where a man takes off his glasses and the room goes completely silent. Like this video if you believe the way you treat people who cannot help you says everything about who you are. Subscribe to Tribal Tales Hub, new story every week. Hit that bell. Comment below, have you ever been tested without knowing it? Tell us what happened. His name was Arthur Chukwuemeka Sterling. The Sterling came from his father, who had taken the English name in the 1950s during a period when English names carried a specific professional advantage in colonial-era Nigeria. A calculation that Pa James Sterling had made clearly and without sentimentality, the way he made most calculations. The Chukwuemeka was from his mother, Mama Adiz, who had accepted the English surname, but had refused to let her first son carry it without also carrying something that told the truth about where the family was from. Arthur was born in 1958 in Ibadan, not in the city itself, but in the Agodi area, a part of Ibadan that in the late 1950s was on the transition between established neighborhood and expanding edge. Pa James Sterling worked for a trading company that dealt in the import and export of goods between Nigeria and the UK, a business that, in the economic landscape of a country approaching independence, had a specific uncertain quality. Things were moving. The whole country was moving, and the people who understood which direction the movement was going to go in were going to do well, and the people who did not understand were going to be in the wrong position when everything settled. Pa James was not an investor. He was a clerk. He managed paperwork for the trading company, tracked documentation of goods coming in and going out, maintained records of prices and quantities and shipping dates. It was the kind of work that made him, over 20 years, one of the most quietly knowledgeable people in Lagos, trade about what things actually cost to move and what they actually sold for at different points in the supply chain. He could look at a manifest and tell you immediately which goods were overpriced, which were undervalued, which routes were being used inefficiently. He never translated this knowledge into wealth. Arthur watched this for 18 years and found it the most educational thing that happened in his childhood. Not because of what his father had, but because of the specific gap between what his father knew and what his father did with what he knew. Pa James had more accurate market information than most traders in Lagos in the 1960s and 1970s, and he used it to do his job better rather than to build anything of his own. He was a man who saw clearly and acted cautiously, and died in 1978, having been consistently correct about things that consistently made other people money. Arthur had one conversation with him that he never forgot. He was 15. He had been asking questions about the trading company, why certain goods moved through certain ports, why some items were more profitable at one time of year than another. His father was answering patiently, explaining the mechanisms, and then at one point Arthur said, "Papa, if you know all of this, why don't you buy the goods yourself and sell them yourself?" His father was quiet for a moment. "Capital," he said. "You could borrow," Arthur said. "I could," his father said, "but borrowing creates risk, and risk with a family is different from risk alone." "But not doing anything is also a risk," Arthur said. "It is the risk that nothing changes." His father looked at him. "You are 15, he said. "Yes," Arthur said. "When you are 30 and you have a family," his father said, "come back and tell me this same thing." "I will," Arthur said, "and I will be able to tell it to you from a different position." He meant it not as a boast, as a statement of direction. His father died before Arthur was 30, but Arthur kept his word anyway, in the specific way of someone who has made a commitment to a person, rather than to the occasion on which the person would have received it. School was where Arthur first understood what his specific intelligence was. He was not broadly brilliant, not the student who topped every subject simultaneously. He was narrow and deep in a way that made some teachers frustrated and others fascinated. Mathematics came to him naturally, not in the performance way of someone showing off mental arithmetic, but in the structural way of someone who saw mathematics as a language for describing how things related to each other. He understood patterns. He understood the relationship between present conditions and future outcomes. He understood how prices moved and why. Economics, when he reached it in secondary school, was the subject that finally gave him the formal framework for what he had been thinking in informal terms, since he was old enough to follow his father's explanations of the trading company's manifests. He went to the University of Ibadan and studied economics. He graduated in 1980 with a degree that was good enough to be respectable and a specific body of knowledge about Nigerian financial markets that was more detailed and more current than his coursework, because he had been supplementing the coursework with everything else he could find: financial newspapers, market reports, any document that described how money was actually moving in the Nigerian economy. He got a job at a Lagos bank, not a senior job, an entry-level analytical position, the kind where a young graduate with a good degree goes to learn the industry from the inside of it. He learned the industry from the inside of it. But more than the industry, he learned people. This was the thing that the formal economics education had not specifically taught him: how decisions were made, not in theory but in practice, by people who had information and interests and fears, and the specific human tendency to act on emotion while constructing a rational justification after the fact. He watched this happen in the bank's trading discussions. He watched analysts make technically correct calls that lost money because the technical correctness ignored the human context. He watched deals that looked risky succeed because the person making them understood something about the people on the other side that the numbers did not capture. He began developing his own framework, not written down, not yet, a mental model for how to read situations that accounted for the human layer that the purely quantitative models missed. In 1985, he left the bank. He had been saving for 3 years. Not a large amount. You cannot save a large amount on a junior analyst's salary in a city like Lagos. But enough. Enough to register a company and pay the first 6 months of an office lease on a small space in Lagos Island that had been vacated by a stationery supply shop whose owner had retired. He called the company Sterling Global. His colleagues at the bank thought this was absurd. Sterling was not a Nigerian name, and Global was aspirational to the point of comedy for a one-room office in Lagos with a single employee. He chose it because he wanted to build something that would make the name accurate eventually. He thought about names as commitments. The business he started was a commodities trading and financial advisory operation, matching Nigerian businesses that needed to buy or sell goods internationally with international counterparties, and providing the financial analysis and market timing advice that made the transactions profitable. He was not acting as a trader himself initially. He did not have the capital for that. He was acting as an informed intermediary, charging advisory fees for information and judgment that his clients did not have. He was very good at this. His clients made money because his analysis was accurate in the way that analysis is accurate when it accounts for the human layer as well as the quantitative one. He understood when a seller was in a position of hidden weakness and how to negotiate accordingly. He understood when a market move was technically supported, but emotionally driven in a direction that would reverse. He understood the difference between information and intelligence. Information was what the data said. Intelligence was what the data meant in context. By 1990, Sterling Global had 5 employees and advisory fees that made the original office space embarrassing. By 1995, it had 30 employees and had expanded into financial investment management, managing funds for a small but growing list of high-net-worth Nigerian clients who had learned, through referrals from people Arthur had made rich, that Sterling Global could be trusted with serious money. In 1997, he met Ngozi. She was 32. She was running a legal practice in Lagos corporate law, specifically the kind of law that sits at the intersection of business and regulation, which in Nigeria in the late 1990s was a space that required both intellectual rigor and a specific navigational intelligence about how the regulatory environment actually worked as opposed to how it was written. She was known in the commercial legal community as someone whose advice you took before you made a move rather than after, because her advice before a move was about avoiding problems and her advice after was about managing them, and avoiding was always cheaper. Arthur had gone to her practice for a specific matter, a contract structure for a fund that he was setting up that had a regulatory dimension he needed guidance on. She had reviewed the structure he proposed and had identified 2 elements that were technically legal but that created exposure that he had not fully mapped. She told him, not diplomatically, directly, the way she told everyone, this structure has a problem here and here and here is what you need to do about it. He listened to all of it. When she finished, he said, "How long did it take you to find those 3 problems?" "About 40 minutes, she said. "What would they have cost me if I had not found them?" he said. She told him approximately. He looked at her. "Can I take you to lunch?" he said. She looked at him over her papers. "Mr. Sterling," she said, "I don't have lunch with clients." "I am asking about lunch, not about the legal matter," he said. She looked at him again. "Tuesday," she said, 12:30, don't be late." He was not late. They had lunch for 2 hours. They talked about the regulatory environment, about the direction of the Nigerian economy, about 2 books they had both read and disagreed about in complementary ways. She was the only person he had had lunch with in years who pushed back on what he said not to be difficult, but because she had a different view and considered it normal to say so. He called his assistant the afternoon after the lunch and rearranged 3 Thursday afternoon commitments to create a regular window. It took 6 months of lunches before he said anything that was not about business or books. What he said eventually was, "I want to keep doing this indefinitely." She understood what he meant. "I will think about it," she said. She thought about it for 1 week and then told him yes. They were married in 1999. Ngozi Okonkwo Sterling. She kept her professional name in practice but took his personally, which was exactly the arrangement they had discussed and agreed on before the wedding, with the specific clarity of two people who had reached their late 30s without the chaos of unclear expectations. The company continued to grow, with Ngozi's legal precision shaping the structures that Arthur's market intelligence was filling. Sterling Global moved from being a boutique advisory house to being a genuine asset management firm. It moved into private equity. It moved into real estate. It moved into infrastructure financing. Specifically, the gap between the capital that major infrastructure projects in West Africa needed and the international investment that was available but could not find its way into those projects without someone who understood both sides. Arthur understood both sides. By 2005, Sterling Global had offices in Lagos, Abuja, London, and Nairobi. By 2010, it had added Accra, Johannesburg, and Dubai. The company had become what its name had always promised. And then Arthur went to the ophthalmologist. He had been having problems with his vision for 2 years. Subtle initially, the kind of changes you attribute to tiredness or to the specific strain of a person who spent too many hours reading documents under inadequate light. He had put off the appointment in the way of someone who had always been physically functional and who had not developed the relationship with medical consultation that a more cautious person would have had. The ophthalmologist told him what he was seeing. The diagnosis was a degenerative condition, not immediately threatening to his remaining vision but progressive. Managed properly, with treatment and with adjustments, he could maintain functional sight for several years. Without management, the timeline was shorter and the outcome was more final. He sat in the consulting room, and he received this information with the specific stillness of a man who has spent his career receiving difficult information and has learned that his response in the first 30 seconds of receiving it is not the response that matters. The response that matters is what happens after. He drove back to the office. He told Ngozi that evening. She received it the way she received difficult information, with complete attention and without the performance of a particular emotion. She asked the specific questions that needed to be asked. She asked about the treatment. She asked about the timeline. She asked what it meant for the things they had planned. "The company," he said. "Yes," she said. "I need to make the succession decision," he said. "Not in 2 years, now, while I can still be fully present in what comes after it." She looked at him. "How do you want to do it?" she said. He told her. She listened to all of it. "You are going to pretend to be blind," she said, not a question. She was repeating it back to confirm that she had heard it correctly. "I am going to use the condition I actually have," he said. "I am going to put on glasses and use a cane and go out on the street between the office and the address I give them. And I am going to find out who they are when they think no one is watching." She was quiet for a moment. "And Sarah," she said. He looked at her. "You think she is ready?" she said. "I think she is the only one who is ready," he said, "but I need to know if I am right." Ngozi was quiet. "And if you are wrong," she said. "Then I need to know that too," he said. She looked at him for a long time. "Go find out," she said. "This is where the test begins. Pay attention." The 3 candidates had been working toward this moment for years. Not because Arthur had announced the succession process years ago. He hadn't. The announcement had come 6 months before, when he had told the board privately that he was beginning to step back and that the question of who would lead the company was one he would answer before the end of the year. The candidates had known they were candidates for approximately 4 months. Marcus Adami was the first. He was 41 years old. He ran Sterling Global's investment banking division, the part of the business that was the most financially aggressive, the part that dealt in the largest transactions, the part where the numbers that moved were the kind of numbers that had multiple commas in them. He had built the investment banking division from a department of 12 people when he joined, 8 years earlier, into a team of 97 across 3 countries. The growth was real, and the results were real, and the specific talent Marcus had the ability to identify deals that other people had not seen yet, and to move on them before the window closed, was a genuine talent that Arthur respected. What Arthur also knew about Marcus from 8 years of observation was that Marcus operated in a world he had divided very clearly into useful and not useful. If you were useful to him, if your presence in the conversation was advancing the outcome he was pursuing, you received his full attention and his considerable capability. If you were not useful, you did not receive anything. This was efficient. In the context of investment banking, where time was genuinely money, and where the number of relationships worth maintaining was limited by the hours in a day, it was arguably even necessary. But it was also the specific thing that Arthur could not overlook in the context of leadership. A division head could organize the world into useful and not useful. A company CEO was responsible for a world where the not useful people were still employees and customers and community members whose trust the company depended on. Marcus had never run a company. He had run a division. The difference between the two was not larger responsibility. It was a different kind of responsibility. Division responsibility was about the performance of a specific function. Company responsibility was about the meaning of the whole. He was working late the night before the final interview, which was not unusual. Marcus was always the last one in his section of the building. He was reviewing a deal structure with 2 of his senior analysts. He had a driver waiting outside. He had reserved a table at a Victoria Island restaurant for his wife, but had sent a message at 9 p.m. to say he would be late and she should order without him. She had replied with a single emoji. He had not responded. He reviewed the deal structure until 11:30 and went home. Alina Brathwaite was the second candidate. She was 38. She ran operations and strategy, the division that, in a company like Sterling Global, was the connective tissue between everything else. She managed the systems that made sure the investment banking division and the asset management division and the infrastructure financing division could all operate without colliding with each other and without creating regulatory problems that would cost the company money and reputation. Alina was extraordinarily competent. This was the most accurate single word for her, not just good, but the specific superlative of competence that comes from someone who genuinely could not understand how processes could be done incorrectly when the correct method was available. She had the mind of a systems designer and the temperament of someone who found disorder physically uncomfortable. She was also someone who thought about her own positioning with the same systematic attention she brought to the company's positioning. She understood the political landscape of the organization, who had influence, who was building it, who was losing it, with the specific accuracy of someone who was always calculating. This was not cynical in the way of someone who didn't care about the company. Alina cared deeply about the company, but she also cared about her own role within it, and the two cares were not always separable. She had prepared for the final interview with the thoroughness she brought to everything. She had a presentation on a tablet. She had notes on specific metrics she intended to reference. She had researched 3 comparable succession stories from major African financial firms and had identified what had worked in each case. She had also told 3 people, carefully selected people, people with influence in the board's social circle, that she was expecting the appointment to come through in the next few weeks. Not as an announcement, as a quiet confidence, the kind that gets repeated. Arthur knew about the quiet confidence being circulated. His assistant, who had worked with him for 14 years and who had the specific skill of knowing what was happening in the building without appearing to gather information, had mentioned it. He had said nothing about it. Sarah Osei was the third. She was 33. She led emerging markets research, the smallest of the 3 divisions represented by the candidates, the one with the tightest budget and the narrowest mandate and the least prestige in the company's internal hierarchy. She had come to Sterling Global 6 years ago from a research background. She had done postgraduate work in development economics at a UK university, written a thesis on capital flows in emerging African markets that had been cited by 2 major international financial institutions, and had come to the company because Arthur had read the thesis and had personally reached out to her. She had almost not joined. The salary offer was lower than what she had been offered by 2 international firms. The title was junior. The division she was joining was, at that time, even smaller and less resourced than it was now. She had negotiated for 3 weeks and had eventually accepted on the basis of a conversation with Arthur in which he had told her, directly, "This is where the most interesting work in the company is happening, and the most interesting work in the company is where you want to be in 5 years." She had believed him because he was right. The Emerging Markets Research Division, under Sarah's leadership, had become the part of Sterling Global that the other divisions came to when they needed to understand what was actually happening in a market before they made a move. She had built relationships with local market participants in 12 West African countries that no Bloomberg terminal could replicate. She had a network of on-the-ground contacts, small business owners, local traders, regional government officials, who told her things about market conditions that were 6 weeks ahead of what the official data showed. She was frequently the first person in the building to know when something important was about to happen. She was also frequently the person who arrived late to internal meetings because she had been on a call with a contact in Kigali or Lomé and had lost track of the time. This was a known quality. Arthur had never said anything about it. He had noticed it for 6 years and had never said anything about it because the quality that made her late to internal meetings was the same quality that made her research irreplaceable. On the morning of the final interview, she was running late. This was not surprising to anyone who knew her. What she was running late from was a 2-hour conversation with a source in a Ghanaian market town who had information about a regulatory change that was 6 weeks from becoming public, and that would materially affect 2 of Sterling Global's current positions in Ghana. She had documented the information. She had flagged it to the relevant division head. She had sent a summary note to Arthur's office. She had also missed her intended bus and was now running for a different one, phone in hand, in the specific state of someone who has done the right thing and is now dealing with the consequences of having done it. She had 40 minutes to get across Lagos to the interview location. Lagos in the middle of the day did not reward optimism about 40 minutes. The test is about to begin, and the man on the street is waiting. Bell subscribed to Tribal Taily's hub. What happens next with Marcus and Alina is the part people don't expect. Hit that bell. Arthur had prepared for this with the same thoroughness he brought to everything that mattered. The glasses were dark, the photosensitive kind that adjusted to light levels, which meant they looked functional rather than theatrical. The white cane was a real mobility cane, and he had spent 2 days learning to use it convincingly enough that a passing glance would produce the appropriate interpretation. The coat was one he had bought from a second-hand shop in Yaba, worn wool, slightly too large, the color of something that had once had a color and had since become non-committal. He had chosen the location carefully. the junction of two moderately busy streets, 1 block from a major intersection, in an area that all three candidates would have to pass through if they took any of the three most direct routes from the Sterling Global building to the interview location. He had his research assistant confirm this by tracking the routes on a mapping application. He was in position by 1:15, 45 minutes before the 2 o'clock deadline. He stood near a bench at the corner, which gave him a visual field of both approaching streets. He held the cane. He had his phone, silenced, in his pocket, 3 pre-written messages waiting, one for each candidate, to be sent based on what happened. He also had a wallet. It contained a specific arrangement. On top, paper that was the same size and color as high-denomination currency, but was not currency, a prop, in the street magician sense. Underneath, a single real item, a chip from the Sterling Global Members Club, a thick gold disc with the company's initial on it that was recognizable to anyone who had been inside the building. He had deliberately positioned the wallet to be visible at the edge of his coat pocket, the way a person who had put it away carelessly might leave it. He waited. Marcus arrived first. Not on foot, Marcus did not walk to important meetings. He was in a company car, a black Mercedes that the company maintained for senior division heads, and he was in the back seat with his phone at his ear and the specific energy of someone who was managing 3 conversations simultaneously while also being in transit. The car slowed at the junction because of a combination of traffic and a pedestrian crossing that had 6 people on it, including Arthur, who was crossing slowly, cane extended, moving at the pace of someone for whom the crossing was requiring significant navigation. Arthur heard the car first. The stop, the specific engine sound of a large vehicle not quite fully stopped. He oriented himself toward it without looking directly, a specific skill he had been practicing, the navigation of someone who was using sound and peripheral information rather than direct vision. The horn came. Not once, 3 times. The second and third were longer. He continued crossing. He was at the slow pace of someone who could not go faster. The cane found the curb on the other side and he stepped up. From inside the car, Marcus said something to the driver. Arthur was close enough, 3 meters from the car window, to hear it. "Move, we'll be late." The car pulled forward. The wing of the side mirror passed approximately 60 centimeters from where Arthur was standing. He did not react visibly. Inside, in the part of him that was Arthur Sterling and not Pa Ben, he noted what he had just observed with the specific neutrality of someone who has received information they had partially expected and are now storing. He went back to the bench. He waited. Elena came on foot. She had told her assistant she preferred to walk when the weather was manageable, because walking gave her time to think without the interruption of a car journey, where the driver inevitably needed direction or engagement. She came from the south, which meant she appeared at the junction from the direction of the main road. She was well dressed in the specific way of someone who had thought about what to wear to a final interview, not overdressed, but precise. Her pace was measured. She was looking at her phone with the specific attention of someone reviewing notes. She noticed Arthur. This was the first difference from Marcus. She actually stopped and looked. Arthur, for his part, had oriented to her approach. He was at the bench. He had, in a natural-looking movement, allowed the wallet to shift slightly further from his pocket, the way things shift when you sit down on a bench and your coat moves. Elena saw the wallet. He could see this in his peripheral vision, the specific quality of someone's attention shifting to a detail. She stopped walking. She looked at him. She looked at the wallet. She came closer. She reached for the wallet. Arthur's hand moved to his pocket, the natural reach of someone who has felt something shift. Elena pulled the wallet back to a position where it was more secure in his pocket. She did not take it. This was better than Marcus. She also, in the process, half opened the wallet. She would have seen the top, the non-currency paper. But the chip, the sterling global chip underneath, she would have seen that too if she had looked carefully. Arthur said in the voice of Pa Ben, slightly slower, slightly rougher, "Thank you, you are very kind." "Of course," Elena said. She was already looking at her phone again. And then Arthur did something he had planned. He said, "Young woman, I am supposed to be meeting someone on Akin Adesola Street, but I have gotten confused about the direction. Could you help me?" Elena looked up from her phone. She looked at him. She looked at her watch. "Akin Adesola," she said. "That is not in this direction," she pointed. "You need to go left here and then." She gave him directions. Standing there on the pavement, she gave him accurate and helpful directions and then said, "I hope you find your way." And then she left. She left him on the pavement with directions she had given correctly, and with the full knowledge that he had said he was confused about where to go and was clearly having difficulty navigating. She gave him information and then left. Arthur sat with this for a moment. He thought she helped. She helped with information. She gave what she could give without it costing her anything she considered significant. He also thought she gave directions to a blind man who had expressed confusion about navigating, and then she left him to navigate alone. He had also noted something else. In the 3 seconds when her hand was at his pocket, repositioning the wallet, he was almost certain, taken a photograph. A quick one, phone already in hand. He could not be certain, but the specific angle of the phone when she stopped and the very slight sound, and the way she had not shown the phone to him or referenced it, he thought so. He made a note. He waited for Sarah. Sarah was running. She appeared at the junction from the north, coming from the bus stop, which was 2 blocks away, in the specific slightly undignified run of someone who has already calculated that they are going to be late and has decided that late but running is better than late and walking. She saw him. She stopped running. She walked toward him with the specific decisiveness of someone who has noticed something and is responding to the noticing rather than the calculation. "Excuse me," she said, "are you all right?" Arthur had not prepared a medication prop. The outline had included one, but in his actual planning, he had decided that the medication story was too constructed. Instead, he had something simpler and more honest. He had a folded piece of paper in his coat's inner pocket, the corner of which was visible, and on that paper were the complex stock riddles, not in Braille as the outline had suggested, because Arthur did not read Braille, but written in small, precise type that would not be readable from outside the pocket. What Sarah had seen was simpler than that. She had seen an old man sitting on a bench with a white cane, who appeared to be looking at something in his hands with the expression of someone who was confused about what they were looking at. He was looking at the junction map on the small laminated card he had prepared, a card that showed the street layout in a format that was clearly designed for someone who was trying to orient themselves. "I am fine," Arthur said in Pa Ben's voice. "I am just trying to understand where I am going. I have a medical appointment." "Where is the appointment?" she said. He told her. The address he gave her was the address of the interview location, not a doctor's office, but she didn't know that yet. She looked at the map card, then she looked around at the street. "That is about 12 minutes from here on foot," she said. "I can walk with you." He looked at her through the glasses, in the way of someone who was looking toward the sound of a voice rather than at a face. "You are not in a hurry," he said. She paused for less than a second. "I am fine," she said. "Let's go." They walked. It was not a short walk. It was the 12 minutes she had estimated, on streets that were moderately busy, with the specific pace of someone using a mobility cane, slower than the surrounding foot traffic, requiring small adjustments at crossings and at pavement irregularities. Sarah walked beside him. She did not walk beside him in the way of someone performing helpfulness. She walked the way you walk with someone when you have decided that you are walking with them and the walk is the point. She matched his pace. She described what was coming: a curb, a shop entrance that extended onto the pavement, a group of people coming the other direction that they needed to navigate around, with the specific, practical, unpatronizing description of someone who had immediately understood what information was useful and was providing it. At one point he said, "You are going somewhere also." "Yes," she said. "Am I making you late?" he said. She paused for a moment. "No," she said, "I am already late. You are not making it worse." He processed this. "What is the appointment?" she said. He had the stock riddle page ready as a prop, but she had asked it conversationally, the way you make conversation on a walk, not the way you interrogate. He gave her the answer he had prepared but simplified. "A financial consultation. I am an old man trying to understand my investments." She smiled. He could not see it, but he heard it in her voice. "What kind of investments?" she said. He told her a simplified version of the riddle, a scenario involving two positions in two different market conditions, and the question of which to hold and which to exit. She was quiet for a moment. He waited. "Hold the second and exit the first," she said. "The second position is in a market that is going to move in the next 6 weeks. I cannot tell you why I know that, but I have seen information this morning that makes it very clear. The first is technically stable, but the stability is being maintained by conditions that are going to change." He stopped walking. She stopped beside him. "You have information from this morning," he said. "Yes," she said. "From what source?" he said. She told him, not the specifics, not the name of the contact or the location, but the nature of the information and the nature of the regulatory change it pointed toward. He was quiet for a long moment. "You are certain," he said. "I documented it this morning and sent it to the relevant people at my company," she said. "Yes." He began walking again. They reached the address. It was the Sterling Global Consulting Office, a building that looked from the outside like a professional services firm of some kind. A lobby, a reception desk. "This is the place," Sarah said. "Thank you," Arthur said. He held out his hand, an old-fashioned gesture, the handshake of someone from a generation where handshakes meant something. She shook it. "Good luck with the appointment," she said, and she turned toward the entrance. He stood for a moment. He took out his phone and sent 3 pre-written messages to his executive assistant. Then he followed her inside. The boardroom is next, and the silence after the glasses come off. The waiting room of the Sterling Global Consulting Office was a conference room on the first floor. Marcus had arrived at 1:58. He was the kind of man who was always slightly early to things that mattered to him, not because he was considerate of other people's time, but because being early gave him a positioning advantage. He had arrived, looked around the conference room, noted that it was a conference room rather than the executive floor of the main building, and recalibrated his understanding of what the final interview would look like, and then had immediately begun the specific work of occupying the space, choosing the chair that gave him the best sightline to the door, adjusting the position of the water glass on the table, establishing his presence. Alina had arrived at 2:03. She had looked around the room with the expression of someone who was noting details for future reference, had greeted Marcus with the professional warmth of two people who worked for the same company and wanted the same job and were aware of both, and had settled into the chair that was most geometrically positioned for someone presenting from a seated position. She had placed her tablet on the table. She had also, within the first 4 minutes, taken a photograph. Arthur had been right. She had posted it to a private story, the Sterling Global chip, visible in the wallet of the blind man she had seen on the street. The caption was something about the importance of being attentive. She had tagged it with a reference to the company's CSR principles. Marcus had seen it on his phone and had sent her a thumbs up. Neither of them had said anything about a man on a street. Sarah arrived at 2:14. She came in with the specific quality of someone who had been moving continuously for the past 20 minutes and had arrived in a different place than they started. She was slightly out of breath, not dramatically, but perceptibly. Her jacket had a small dust mark on the sleeve from where she had brushed against something on the walk. She saw Marcus and Alina. She saw the room. She said, "I'm sorry I'm late." 14 minutes, Marcus said. He said it with the pleasantness of someone delivering useful information. "I know," Sarah said. She sat down. Alina looked at the dust on Sarah's sleeve, then at her tablet, then at the door. They waited. At 2:20, the door opened. A man came in. He was in a worn coat. He had a white cane. He had dark glasses. He moved slowly, with the navigation of someone for whom the room's layout was being processed through sound and tactile cues. Marcus looked at the man. "Excuse me," Marcus said. He raised his voice slightly in the way of someone addressing a person they have categorized as potentially hard of hearing as well as visually impaired. "This is a private meeting. You need to leave." The man continued toward the head of the table. Marcus stood. "Sir," Marcus said, "I need you to leave this room. Do you understand me? This is a private meeting." He turned toward the door. "Security," he said, loud enough to be heard in the corridor. "Security, there is someone in here who should not be here." Alina did not stand. She was watching the man with the specific expression of someone who was processing multiple interpretations simultaneously and had not yet arrived at a conclusion. Sarah was looking at the man. She was looking at the coat. She was looking at the specific worn quality of the wool. She was looking at the white cane and the way it was being used. And she was looking at the hands. She had spent 12 minutes walking next to this man. She had looked at his hands when he held hers for the handshake at the door. She had the specific memory for physical detail that people who do observation-based research develop over time. These were the same hands. She did not say anything. She watched. The man reached the head of the table. He put down the cane. He reached up and took off the glasses. The room did the specific thing that rooms do when something shifts that cannot be unshifted. Not a sound, not a movement, but a change in the quality of the air, as if everyone had inhaled at the same time and held it. Arthur Chukwuemeka Sterling stood at the head of the table. He was 65 years old. He was wearing a coat he had bought from a second-hand shop in Yaba. He had the specific posture of a man who had occupied boardrooms his entire adult life, and who was now standing in one in different clothes than usual, and was entirely unbothered by the difference. He looked at Marcus. "Thank you for calling security," he said. "I was beginning to worry you had lost the instinct." Marcus sat down. His face was doing something complicated. Arthur looked at Alina. "I saw the post," he said. "Attentiveness, Sterling Global CSR Principles, a photograph you took while I was sitting on a bench with a white cane." Alina's face was very still. "You were going to use me for content," Arthur said, "while I was sitting there." Alina said nothing. He looked at Sarah. 14 minutes, he said. "I know," Sarah said. "I am sorry." "What were you doing?" he said. "Walking you here," she said. "You knew it was me," he said. "I recognized your hands in the lobby," she said. "Before that I did not know." "But before you knew," he said, "for the 12 minutes before you recognized my hands, you already knew you were late. What were you doing?" She looked at him. "What I thought was right," she said. He sat down. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Let me tell you what I saw on the street today, and then I am going to tell you what happens next." He described each encounter. Marcus he described without anger, with specificity, The horn, the car door, the 60 centimeters. He did not perform the description, he delivered it. Marcus sat with his hands on the table. "You have built something real in this company," Arthur said. "The investment banking division under your leadership has produced returns that are among the best in our peer group. You are good at what you do. I am not questioning that." He paused. "But you nearly hit a blind man with a car to avoid being late to a meeting, and you did not know the meeting was with the blind man. You just hit a horn and told the driver to move, because the old man in the road was an obstacle between you and where you needed to be." A silence. "I cannot give you 2,000 employees," Arthur said, "because 2,000 employees are people. Not all of them will be useful to you on any given day. Not all of them will be on your way to where you are going. The ones who are not, I do not know what you will do with them, and I cannot not know that in this role." Marcus said nothing. He looked at Alina. "You stopped," he said. "That is not nothing. You secured the wallet. That is genuinely good." Alina received this. "You also took a photograph," he said, "of a blind man on a bench, for a post about attentiveness." He let that sit. "And you gave me directions," he said, "accurate ones, helpful ones, and then you left me to navigate them alone because you had done the thing that looked like help and your time had been spent." He was quiet. "You are very good at the things that look like what they are," he said, "and also at the things that look like what they are not. I am not certain I can always tell which one I am seeing, and in this role I need to be certain." He looked at Sarah. "You were late to the most important meeting of your career," he said. "Yes," she said. "You made that choice in real time," he said, "knowing you were already late, knowing that I was going to be in this room at 2 o'clock and you were not going to be." "Yes," she said. "Why?" he said. She thought about it for a moment, not performing the thinking, actually thinking. "Because the alternative was worse," she said. "Worse than losing the CEO appointment," he said. "Leaving someone who needed help on the side of the road is worse than being late," she said. "Yes, for me it is." "Not strategically," he said, "not by any calculation of self-interest." "No," she said, "not by any calculation of self-interest." He was quiet. "You also solved the stock riddle I gave you on the street," he said. She looked at him. "The financial consultation," she said, "that was a test also." "Yes," he said. "Was your answer correct?" "Yes," she said. "If the information I received this morning is accurate, and it is, then the exit from the first position and the hold on the second is the right call. Your company's Ghana positions are going to move significantly in the next 4 to 6 weeks." He looked at her. "I know," he said. "I read your note this morning." She blinked. "You read my note before coming to sit on a bench," she said. "I read your note," he said, "and it confirmed what I had been thinking for 3 weeks, and then I went to sit on a bench." He stood again. "I am going to tell you something now," he said. "All 3 of you, because you all deserve to know it before this conversation ends." He looked at each of them. "I am losing my sight," he said. "Not metaphorically, medically. The condition is degenerative. I have had it confirmed by 3 different specialists and I am managing it with treatment. But the progression is real and the timeline is what it is." The room was very still. "The test today was personal," he said. "It was personal because I am going to need someone in this role who does not treat people as obstacles or content. I am going to need someone who, when they see a problem in front of them, responds to the human reality of it before calculating the strategic reality. Not because strategy doesn't matter, strategy matters enormously, and Sarah knows this as well as anyone in this company." He looked at Sarah. "But I am going to need someone who sees, in the specific sense, who sees what is actually there, not what is useful." He picked up his cane. "My assistant will contact each of you this afternoon," he said. The formal announcement will come from the board. He walked to the door. He turned. Sarah, he said, the 12 minutes, don't apologize for those again. He left. One more section, the part about what came after. The formal announcement came the following morning. Sarah Ose had been appointed Group Chief Executive Officer of Sterling Global, effective in 30 days, to allow for a transition period and for the formal documentation processes that the board's governance charter required. She was in her office, the Emerging Markets Research Office, the one with the tight budget and the overflowing notebooks and the wall of handwritten contacts from 12 countries, when she received the notification from the board secretary. She looked at it on her screen for a moment. She called the one person she called when something significant happened. Her mother answered on the second ring. Sarah, her mother said. Her mother always answered this way, not hello, not a greeting, just the name, as if confirming that the call was real. Mama, Sarah said, I need to tell you something. Tell me, her mother said. She told her. Her mother was quiet for a long time after. When she spoke, her voice had the quality it always had when something had moved past the category of ordinary. You said you were already late, her mother said, and you stopped anyway. Yes, Sarah said. That is because of how I raised you, her mother said, without vanity, as a statement of causal fact. Yes, Sarah said. Good, her mother said. Now go and be a CEO and don't be late. She laughed. She went to find Arthur. He was in his office, his real office, the 22nd floor one, which he was in the process of preparing for the transition. The expensive art was still on the walls. The clear desk was as clear as it always was. The Lagos view was the Lagos view. He was standing at the window when she knocked. Come, he said. She came in. I want to understand something, she said. She did not sit down. She stood in the middle of the office in the specific way of someone who has something to say and is saying it. Tell me, he said. The Ghana positions, she said. You read my note before the test, but you were already thinking about the Ghana positions 3 weeks ago. Yes, he said. How, she said. My contact only came to me with the information yesterday morning. There is no public information. The regulatory change has not been announced. He looked at her. I have been building this company for 40 years, he said. I have contacts that go back 30 years in markets that most people in this building have not worked in, and I have been losing my sight slowly enough that my other senses have been compensating. He turned back to the window. I hear more than I used to, he said. I notice things that are not visible. The information was there. It was in the pattern of conversations I had been having for 3 months. You found it from a different direction. You were right. I was also right. She was quiet. That is what I am giving you, he said. Not just the company, the 40 years. I am going to be here, not as CEO, not in any operational role, but as the person you call when something does not make sense. When the pattern is saying one thing and the data is saying another. When you need someone who has seen enough wrong things be right eventually to give you a reference point. She looked at him. You need me, she said. He turned from the window. Yes, he said. I need a CEO who sees clearly, and I need someone who does not treat me differently because I am losing mine. She understood. The street, she said. The street, he confirmed. She had walked with him not because she had calculated that it was the right thing to do strategically. She had walked with him because a man on a bench had needed to get somewhere and she was able to help him get there. Without the calculation, without the performance, without the photography. She had done it the way the right things get done, because it was right. I have questions, she said. Of course you do, he said. Marcus, she said. Stays, he said. His division results are real and his skills are real. He is going to have a difficult few months. Then he will decide whether this company is where he wants to be. And Alina. Alina is going to be very useful to you, he said. More useful than she has been to me, because she is going to be working under someone who does not need to wonder what she is optimizing for. You will know, and knowing will let you use her without being surprised by her. Sarah thought about this. The photograph she took, Sarah said. She deleted it this morning, he said, 20 minutes after the boardroom. How do you know? She said. My assistant monitors company devices, he said. Standard security protocol. Alina knows this, she set up the protocol. Sarah was quiet. She deleted it because she understood that keeping it was wrong, Sarah said, not because she was afraid of being caught. That is a generous interpretation, Arthur said. It is the one I intend to use, she said, until I have evidence otherwise. He looked at her. 40 years ago, he said, I sat across from my father and I told him that not doing anything was also a risk. He said, come back when you have a family and tell me this same thing. She waited. I want you to come back, he said, in 10 years and tell me what you think about that conversation. What will have changed? She said. Nothing and everything, he said. The idea is the same. The weight of it is different. She nodded. I will come back in 10 years, she said. You will come back in 6 months, he said, for the quarterly review, but in 10 years also. She smiled. She held out her hand. He shook it. The same handshake as the lobby of the consulting office. The same hands. You recognized my hands, he said. Yes, she said. What was it? He said. What specifically? The knuckle of your right index finger, she said. You have a specific scar on it. You mentioned it in a company meeting 3 years ago. You said you had it from a motorbike accident when you were 22. I noticed it because I was taking notes, and you used it to illustrate a point about learning from the wrong decision at the right time. He was quiet. You remembered that from 3 years ago, he said. I remember things, she said. It is useful in my work. It is useful in this work too, he said. She left the office. She walked back to the emerging markets research space, her space, for 30 more days. She sat at her desk. She looked at the wall of handwritten contacts, 12 countries, years of relationship building, the specific knowledge that you accumulate when you decide that what is actually happening in a market is more important than what the official data says. She thought about the 12 minutes on the street. She thought about walking next to a man who moved slowly, describing the curb and the shop entrance and the group of people coming the other way. She thought, I did not know that was the interview. And then she thought, that is the point. That is entirely the point. She picked up her notebook. She began writing the 30-day transition plan. Ngozi Sterling was waiting for Arthur when he came home that evening. She was in the garden. Their Lagos house had a garden that she had designed herself over 20 years, adding things gradually with the patience of someone who understood that gardens were not built, they were accumulated. She was reading. She had a glass of water beside her. He came through the back door and sat in the chair across from her. She looked at him over her reading. How did it go? She said. Well, he said. Sarah, she said. Sarah, he confirmed. She went back to her book. What she said on the street, he said, about the Ghana positions, she was right. I know, Ngozi said. I read her note this afternoon. Your assistant forwarded it. She solved a riddle I gave her while walking me to the interview location that she was late to, he said. Yes, Ngozi said. She did not know it was a riddle, he said. She thought it was a genuine question from an old man worried about his investments. Arthur, Ngozi said. Yes. Why are you telling me things I already know the answer to? He was quiet. Because I wanted to say them out loud, he said, while I can still see your face when I say them. She put the book down. She looked at him. The Lagos evening was doing what it always did. The specific quality of light that happened at this exact time of day in this exact place, which was different from the quality of light in London or Nairobi or any of the other places the company had offices. This was their light. This was the garden they had built over 20 years. What she said on the street, Ngozi said, about leaving someone on the side of the road being worse than being late. Yes, he said. You have thought about that every day for 2 years, she said. Yes, he said. She reached across the garden table and she took his hand. You made the right choice, she said, in who you gave it to. Yes, he said. They sat in the garden until the light changed. Arthur Sterling had a saying that he had used throughout his career, not in speeches, not in presentations, but in the private conversations that mattered. He said it to his team leaders, to his analysts, to the people he was developing over years of working alongside them. He said, the world sees your status, the wise see your soul. He meant it as a warning and as a challenge simultaneously. A warning because status was easy to perform and difficult to see through if you were not paying attention. Because clever people could learn very quickly what the performance of a particular status looked like and could reproduce it well enough to fool a room. And a challenge because seeing someone's soul required something. It required slowing down, which was expensive in a world that rewarded speed. It required looking at what people did in the moments that didn't matter strategically, which was counterintuitive in an environment where strategic thinking was the primary currency. It required treating the small moments, the man on the street, the woman on the bench, the employee whose name you didn't know yet, as if they were the large moments. Because they were. The man on the street was the large moment. He had disguised himself as a blind man not to trick his candidates. He had disguised himself to create conditions where each of them could show him their soul without performing it, where the calculation was removed and what was left was character. Marcus had shown him a man who honked his horn at an obstacle. Elena had shown him a woman who helped what could be photographed. Sarah had shown him someone who stopped, and then kept walking, and then described the curb and the shop entrance and the group of people coming the other way. And then, on the way to a meeting she was already going to miss, solved a market riddle because she thought an old man was worried about his investments. The lesson is not that being nice is the path to success. The lesson is that who you are in the moments that don't count is who you actually are. Marcus had spent years being exactly who he was in the moments that counted. He had performed extremely well in every evaluation Arthur had ever designed. He was the candidate who, on paper, looked the most ready. But the moment that didn't count was a blind man on a street, and in that moment, Marcus did not adjust. He was exactly himself, and exactly himself was a man who honked his horn at an obstacle. Sarah did not adjust either. She was exactly herself in a moment that should have been the most important strategic moment of her career. Late to the final interview, knowing she was late, knowing that being late was going to cost her, and exactly herself was someone who stopped and walked slowly next to a man with a cane and described what was coming. She was not performing this. There was no one watching. Except Arthur. Which is the other lesson. Someone is always watching. Not in the paranoid sense, not in the sense of surveillance, in the sense that the world has a way of delivering the moments that reveal you to the people who need to see what you actually are. Arthur had needed to see. He had looked. He had found what he was looking for. And now Sterling Global is in the hands of a woman who, on a Lagos street in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon, chose 12 minutes with a stranger over the most important meeting of her career. And who, in choosing it, proved that she had everything the meeting was testing for. That is the story. This has been Tribal Tales Hub. If this story hit something in you, if the 12 minutes stayed with you like this video, one click, it tells us to keep bringing you stories like this one. Subscribe to Tribal Tales Hub. We are here every week. New story every week. Hit that bell so you never miss one. Comment below. Tell us about a time you made the right choice when the wrong choice was easier. We want to hear it. We read everything. Share this story with someone who needs the reminder that who you are in the small moments is who you actually are. You know someone who needs this. Send it to them. This has been Tribal Tales Hub. We will see you in the next one.